Alright, well after making the video piano stringing basics and watching it, I realized I could have been a lot clearer about a few things, and hopefully let me clarify and amplify some of this stuff. I'll go a little slower if this is your first piano that you're stringing. Again, the basics are this pattern right here with two notes. I'm going to try to isolate it here. Two notes, these two A-graphs, these 6 wires, and then down here to these 3 hitch pins. The confusing part is there's 2 notes and there's 3 wires, and it's the 3 hitch pins, and 6 tuning pins, 1 for each wire. So I've labeled these tuning pin number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you start with tuning pin 1 and string number 1. Comes down through there, through the A-graph, over the bridge, as far this note, the left note of this left string on the bridge, around the hitch pin, back over here becomes the middle wire. This comes down to pin 2, 3 goes down there around the hitch pin to tuning pin 4, and then 5 and 6 do the same thing. And then when that changes is when you have one of these, a single string or a hitch, I call that. So this is the second basic pattern to learn. It has 3 pins, three strings, but are only 2 strings, but three wires. It's getting confusing already, right? So this one you start on pin 1. Put the string down there, go around the loop, and just to add insult to insult, a lot of times, most pianos, this hitch is over here, but this one's different. So you made that clear when you took the piano apart, and you can put a piece of masking tape over there or something to make sure you remember that, because that'll mess up your spacing on this duplex scale bar if you don't do it right. So anyway, this one, that single string comes down here to this note. So that's 2 strings on 1 note and 3 pins. Now what that also does is change the pattern. Instead of here we had pin 1, pin 2, pin 3, pin 4. Now pin 1 is now here. This one gets, let's ignore that. Now we're starting over with the pattern. Now this becomes tuning pin 1, tuning pin 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And when you string this, you'll start on tuning pin 1. The wire will come down here like on this side, on the left side, like it was in the original pattern, loop around there, and then we're back to this first basic pattern. Now we're going to do this next section here. I'm going to try to do it a little slower and show how to, this is what you want to end up with, these Beckett's basically over here at 3 o'clock, and I didn't really expound too much on how to get there, so I'm going to try to work on that a little better. But here, so the 2 things I told you to remember were there's a brace under there at all times, especially if you're working with a small brace. Make sure you've moved it over to this section now. And now we're going to start with 15.5. This is the way it's labeled, going this way. So this was 16. Going this way, and now I'm ready to start with 15.5, and yeah, so sometimes it's confusing with some things are labeled on the bridge, but again, that's part of labeling everything right before you take the piano apart. So now this is tuning pin number 1, 2, and whatever. Now I got to do this awkward thing where trying to put the camera up here without dropping it. Should have Velcro on this thing instead. So let me try to go into a little bit more detail about just how to get the Beckett's lined up at here is the wire, 15.5 wire going into the tuning pin. And I always put it in there, put the wire in there until it's flush. I don't want to see the wire sticking out like that. It looks ugly, and you make it terrible for the next guy who takes the piano apart. So anyway, you put the wire in there flush, and it's even when I bend this wire, it's going to back out a flush a little bit, but I want to just know that it's flush now. And I'm holding the tuning pin like this with the wire and going up, the wire coming out of the pin and going up like that. Now I put the crank on it. The crank, I use the crank when the wire's not in the piano. This is tuning pin number 1. This is string wire number 1. And there's nothing holding this wire except my hand. So I use the crank. And now I'm making the Beckett as nice and crisp as I can. And then you're counting 1, 2, 3 turns. So this is what I'm looking at. I put 3 coils on there. And now I let go. When I let go of it, this is what I want to see. I want to see the Beckett at 6 o'clock. Oh, that's 9 o'clock, sorry. I want to see the Beckett at 9 o'clock and the wire coming straight. I call that up. You can call it whatever you want, but this is the way I'm going to put it into the pin block. And if I could move the camera, you would see that the wire is going to be heading towards the hitch pin. And the Beckett is at, 9 o'clock. Now, I forgot to put the wire through here, of course, because I was talking to you, and I can't do 2 things at once. So anyway, I'm putting this in tuning pin hole number 1, and I'm going to tap that in. Maybe I can grab the camera without killing myself. So hopefully you can see that. If not, too bad. So then I'm going to put the wire down here through the right spot on the bridge, and then around the hitch pin, and then come back here to cut the wire to what hopefully is the right length. Maybe I can do a little better job of showing you how I do that. What I do is I use this tool. Here's the cutter, and what I use is this rivet, this one right here, to gauge how long to cut the wire. So I'm pulling it tight. Now I'm going to look down from above. I can't move the camera and show that, but I have my tool right here. If you could. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm looking straight down this tool. This is right where the tuning pin hole is going to be. Yeah, I can't do this without a cameraman, so you're going to have to visualize me looking down from up here, right where the tuning pin hole is going to be right below the cutter. And I'm probably not going to do this right at all, but and then I'm using my finger to mark where that rivet is, where this rivet is right here, and then I'm gonna cut it right here. Now this varies with tools and varies with people, and it varies even when I'm doing a job. So you got to keep your eye on trying to get the right length. But how you can vary it now, I've done this so much that now that this is in place and I'm ready to wind it onto the next pin, tuning pin number 2, this is still string number 1, I'm going to use this, the T-hammer this time, because I don't want to be trying to crank. A lot of times you're close to the piano and you're cranking, and this is just an easier tool to use. Because now having the luxury of having the wire being held by the piano, all I have to do is pull this whole thing back at me, and it makes a perfect Beckett with very little finger strength. So anyway, now I'm going to wind 1, 2.5, and that Beckett should be looking right back at me which is going to be, when I turn it like this, I know if I've got the length right by the fact that it jumped a little bit when I put it in there. But this is what I use as my my standard. That first one is at 9 o'clock and the second one is at 6 o'clock. And just by feel, now I know those are correct. So again, that's tuning pin 1 and 2 on string 1, going down there like that. And then I'm going to do that again. I don't know if I have to bother doing that again, but then you're going to pound those down. Yeah, you can do that. And again, one of the worst mistakes you can make is pounding these down too far, because you can always go back and redo those anytime you want. In a little bit, in fact, I'm going to go back and do these 3 or 4 times, leveling. Now, there's a couple different tools you can use to keep the coils tight. One of them is something like this. Especially if you're just learning stringing, these are easy to use. It keeps the coil up nice and high, and when you tighten it, it'll keep it nice and tight. When I string, I'll string all of these 15s, and I'll just use a string hook like this to hold it up. Because with the string hook, I can do a little spacing up here in the front, and then when I'm holding it up, I still know it's going to come around nice and tight. So I'm bringing that to almost 3 o'clock, whatever that is, and then I'm going to do the second one. And then listen, you want to pull those up pretty tight so that when you put these beckets in, they're going to stay in, and the coil is going to stay nice and tight while you're, I mean, get to know the sound of the string. And I can tell this is very, very low, so leave it up here. When it starts sounding like a piano note, and you know it's tight enough that it's not going to slip. So anyway, that's a little more detail than the last video, and hopefully cleared up some of the stuff. Again, getting used to these patterns when there's no strings in here and when you're looking at it for the first time, it can be a little confusing. So make sure when you take it apart, you've done the right thing. So there it is.